Hello, welcome to Far From the Madding Crowd's interview series, Spoken Mirrors, Linlithgow Bookshop's finest export of interviews. And I'm joined with Savannah Brown in a bunker somewhere in West Lothian. And we're going to, discuss literature, books, etc. and various. Thank you so much for being here.
That's good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I've never been to a bunker.
Never to a bunker?
No, my first bunker.
Your first bunker? Oh my gosh. Wow. And you're from America, so that's crazy.
No, right.
No bunker. Okay, interesting. Well, this is vaguely, my first question is vaguely related to bunkers. As there's so many. I mean, there's so many
what a
questions.
Coincidence.
So most writers operate within obscurity, right? So somebody like, I don't know, James Joyce, releases 2,500 copies of Ulysses, and only a bunch of nutters in France want a copy. And then slowly, it kind of, from the avant-garde, it moves to the mainstream, and there's a kind of cruise, that kind of cultural capital. So, I suppose you're an interesting exception to this, because you've managed to sort of gather this digital audience through your YouTube and Instagram. Well, not the opposite. No, it's not the opposite. Because that was a century ago. No, I'm not trying to create like a dialectic or whatever. But does your digital audience does that influence how you work as a writer? Are you kind of aware of that? Like how when you interact with just other thinking about literature. Do you think about that position at all when thinking?
It's kind of hard not to. I guess the first thing I think of is that everything digitally feels like it needs to happen really, really fast. So it feels like there's a constant, you need to be doing something more now. And it's like, I always say I want to be like a freaking Donna Tartt and spend 10 years on a book, but I feel like I literally cannot.
Right, yes.
With everything moving so quickly, I'm like, you just do it now. But... I don't know. It's just because everything comes from there. It is hard not to think about, because that's the immediate feedback that you get too. So sort of everything you're hearing about it is from there. So it's hard not to take that sort of sphere into account when you're. Yeah.
And I suppose genre-wise, I'm also interested in. In terms of your fiction, you write in YA, right, which is a genre which, there's a lot of discourse about, for lack of a lot of discourse, for lack a better term. I suppose, why were you initially drawn to that genre? Is it the emotional intensity of those characters?
Yeah,
or?
It's weird. Well, the first one came out when I was 22, which meant I started writing it, I think, when I was 19 or 20.
Right.
And I honestly think a lot of it had to do with just proximity.
Sure,
if nothing else. I felt like those experiences were the freshest, and I think it's a lot easier, obviously, to be a 40-year-old writing about a 17-year-old than it is to be a 19-year-old writing about anyone else besides an adjacently, young person. So I think it just sort of felt like necessity more than anything else at the time. But also, as I've now matured or something, I'm still very fond of it. Because like you said, emotional intensity, sort of very turbulent time. It's fun to write about because everything feels so important. And there's a lot of universal experiences of youth that I think as people age tend to branch off a bit. But there's some things that are just completely the same for everyone, I feel like.
Yeah.
So
the necessary milestones.
I
suppose that's why the apocalypse always comes up in YA, because every moment is the end of the world.
And then it's something that everyone is affected by it.
Yeah, totally. Would you then call because that was your first novel, which is The Truth About Keeping Secrets, and the second one is The Things We Don't See?
Correct.
Yes.
Why would I be lying to you? I'd be like, yes, and that's right. It's just something else.
It's wait, I can't remember my own title. So it's interesting. There was a shift in imprint, I noticed. So the first one, or at least in the UK edition, it's Penguin Random House Children's, and I think.
Is it Puffin?
And it's.
See, I didn't even know this.
Right. We're learning new things every day.
So if you were going to ask me about it...
It's what do you think about the thing you don't know?
Let me think of an opinion really fast. Is it Puffin? Is that what it is?
Yeah, this one here is Puffin at least. Well, it's got... I think that's Puffin.
I don't know if...
Well, I suppose
Can I see?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'm not sure, because to be honest, I wasn't sure if it was like an aesthetic thing. It certainly
Right,
wasn't
for sure.
something we had a conversation about. Sorry for this little interlude.
No, this is brilliant. This is wonderful. I mean, I suppose the wider question I kind of wanted to ask is, was there, for the second novel, was there a departure from the YA genre in your mind? Or were you very much still thinking, I am working
That's
with
still
IA?
YA, yeah. I think, because I am working on an adult novel now.
Okay.
And I didn't want it to be like veering away a little bit from YA. If I was going to like write not YA, I wanted it to be like very clearly like for a different audience and everything.
Right.
Like, because I mean they're marketed very similarly, and even like, even like cover wise, they wanted them to look sort of, they wanted them to like sit next to each other in a way that made sense.
Yes.
So no, it's still very much YA, which was actually because after the first one, because you're still so close to sort of teenagehood, it was nice to have a bit of hindsight, retrospect, etc. From the experience of writing the first, but also again, distance from being a young person.
For sure, yeah.
It helps you actually, because you're not necessarily like further away from the feelings in a meaningful way. You're just better at articulating them. So that's how kind of felt. But
nice. And I suppose you know, the other thing about essentially talking about them as this sort of not duology, I suppose, but you know, they are connected.
They sort of feel like it almost.
Well, yeah, a spiritual successor, because I mean, both of them, for me, what really struck me was they're almost quite ekphrastic, like I think that's how you pronounce it. The sort of like, they both talk about art in interesting ways. So in you know, The Truth About Keeping Secrets, you know, the Dylan Thomas poem, An Arcade Fire.
Yeah.
And you're laughing. I think you're laughing. Is there self-consciousness with that?
Almost, because, yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure I can talk about that in any meaningful way. It's just funny, like honestly, it's so, because I haven't read that for ages.
For sure.
Someone asked me recently, one of my friends asked me what my favorite one of my books was, and I said Sweet Dark is probably what did I say? No, I said Sweet Dark is probably favorite, but Tax is like best. No, Sweet Dark's best behaved, and Tax tries very hard. Tax is really eager to please.
Nice.
And that's what, every time anyone says anything about Tax, I'm like, yeah, she was very eager to please. Eager to
please. I suppose that's kind of the natural debut, right? The debut is the young writer. Yeah. But you know, that's a good. It's an interesting evolution then, I suppose, from the first to the second one. Is that with this first one is very bold in saying this piece of artwork, and this artwork is leading to this revelation about grief. I suppose we'll touch on grief as well, because that's definitely both in both the novels. But then the second one is interesting that there's almost this like, I don't know, like I was going to say Orphic. I don't know if that's pretentious, but you know, it's the main character is following in the footsteps of a musician and another artist. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you think of these novels in conversation with other works of art like that, or is that more subconscious kind of thing?
I think it's more subconscious.
Yeah.
It's interesting with the things we don't see, because it was like she was always a musician that she was going after, and then I'm like, well, you need to build up like the mythology of this musician who doesn't exist. So I mean, there's like fake song lyrics in it, and so that was really interesting to do. But it kind of, I don't know. That's a really good question that I'm not sure is something that I was like consciously thinking about. I think it might just have to do with the way I interact with the world and attach meaning to things.
Yes.
And think like this experience felt a lot like this the Dylan Thomas poem, whatever. So, and I'm not really very good at writing about people who are too dissimilar from myself.
For sure, yes.
So I think it just sort of mirrors maybe the way I interact with things, but that's an interesting observation. I didn't really even think that much of it. What an incredible interview.
So I suppose, going back to sort of YA as genre, I mean, that is quite a popular and so commercial genre, right? So incredibly. So, well, I mean, was there ever any pressure to compromise, I guess, or did you ever feel that kind of attention there between what you were wanting to do?
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think again, it was just the whole thing was weird because I was very young in sort of like rooms that I didn't really feel like I even had the right to be in the first place. And again, like so eager to please. I think we originally met with the editor for Tax, and she had some ideas, and I was sort of not that I didn't like them, but I was sort of like, I am willing to do
anything
this, to make this happen kind of thing. And I think I sort of stood my ground a little bit more with the second one. But definitely with Tax, there was, I mean, it was a lot more like, again, I don't even know if this would have been good, and perhaps it was a good thing that my very patient editor was like, no, we won't be doing that. But there was originally like, at the end, Sydney has like a sort of breakdown. She used to have a pet tarantula that she spoke to sort of in duress, and that was sort of like a weird, like, I don't know. At the time, I'm like, this is really cool. And I read it again recently, and I'm like, perhaps given a bit more time. But I mean, not in like crazy ways necessarily. I think definitely Tax was originally more of like dark, moody, contemporary kind of thing. And obviously like sort of thrillers at the time were really popular, and now that portion of the market is almost like, not almost,
so
is oversaturated.
Tax, when did Tax come out again then?
2019.
2019, right?
Yeah, it's not even that long ago.
Well, I suppose things
like,
do move fast,
no,
yeah.
right.
So it's almost pre-Sally Rooney, and that's the very much the popular, that's the kind of
that's true.
mode, I guess, right now.
Yeah. But yeah, so they wanted to sort of veer more towards a thriller, which led to a couple incredibly angry reviews from people being like, I thought this was going to be like a high stakes, like action adventure,
no,
but like
sure.
I think people thought it would be a lot more like zingy than it was, when actually it's sort of a bit contemplative and introspective and quiet. But
it definitely felt, I mean, like, because I mean, there's so many novels where, you know, it's almost the cliche, right, of the orphaned protagonist, because it's like, well, then they don't have to work on the thing. But I mean, in that novel, I mean, it is definitely
sort of the
talking about grief,
very
very central to it.
And I think in YA especially, not that it was like a jab at it in anything, but it feels like to a lot of like protagonists, the first thing that happens is my parent died, and then they do something else. Right. When, like, what do you mean you did something else? Like, surely that's going to be like one of the defining things of your life.
Totally. Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just sitting in that was sort of the initial idea. And trying to think for the things we don't see, it was actually a pretty straightforward writing process. I think it's different because when I signed with Penguin, it was for 2 books, and the first one was Tax, obviously, and then the second one was just like untitled Savannah Brown second book. Like, it didn't even exist. I didn't really even have the idea for it. So that was interesting, writing something that was just like contracted kind of thing. And so not that there was pressure to like fill a certain gap or like what I felt like was missing from YA or something, but that those thoughts were definitely there of like wanting to write something that, I don't know, that like fit and made sense,
like that thematic. Yeah, okay, interesting. And yeah, so you didn't have like second novel syndrome, as it were. You didn't feel the pressure to.
I mean, I definitely did. I think the pressure sometimes becomes so much that you're like
right, you resign to it.
I simply cannot do this anymore.
Right. Yeah.
A human body cannot withstand this much. So and I mean, it's just it's a really long process too. That I mean, probably the hardest was like the second draft of it. That really felt like, I think I felt it hardest than second novel syndrome, but I don't know. And again, this is totally unrelated, but it's just something I've been thinking about recently, because publishing moves so slow. What you sort of don't realize until it happens is that you are not stuck, but stuck promoting a book that you have sort of emotionally moved on from, that you finished like a year and a half ago. And now you're having to like remember, firstly, what happened, secondly, like how you felt during it, when so much of it is just like, I don't know. And so you're doing that while at the same time like getting excited about new things that you really want to talk about but you can't because no one has any idea. So
well, that is interesting. I mean, and that kind of goes back to the idea of this digital audience, right? There is, I mean, obviously the novel has so many, reasons that it thrives in the 21st century, in my opinion, rather than, I feel like there's people who always have to constantly defend it. I feel like that's actually a bit unwarranted. But what was I saying? But Yeah, I mean, I suppose especially when you're a young writer, or one is a young writer, so much is changing and there's almost a turbulent, an exponential, almost like growth process that by the time something 18 months ago, you kind of look back and you're like, what? Yeah. You know? Exactly. I suppose for that to be then played out on a bigger stage is spicy.
No, so it's that in combination with, like you said, everyone's expectation that things happen really quickly.
Yes.
And so I'll even like post like, I don't know, like on my Instagram stories, here's like a word count for something and be like, I'm working on this, and someone's like, oh, is this the one coming out next month? I'm like, no. and I'm like, I admire your optimism.
Yeah, I was going to say,
those
wow,
things are even capable of happening. That's sort of like childlike wonder that I like, but it's just funny, and it's not their fault because you don't know how it works until you do it. But that just makes me laugh because nothing has ever moved that fast ever.
Well, our greatest public intellectual, Bo Burnham,
we've been talking about Bo for... Yeah.
Well, okay, I mean, because he talked about it before. He talked about that he was anxious about his 3-year absence between his
I
first
think about that all the time.
And obviously it worked out.
I swear that opinion is from him. I think about him
so many of my opinions are from him. I mean, have you seen Inside yet?
Yes.
I haven't.
We should watch it.
I'm really excited.
It's so good.
We can
have this isn't the interview. We can have a whole conversation about it later. I have a lot to say.
I want to have this conversation.
I really liked it.
Okay, amazing.
That's very funny.
So I think I brought him up before with like Roseanne Water. Anyway, so there's, I mean, kind of, I suppose you've got this alternative stream, for lack of a better word. So you've got your fiction, and this is very much bound in the big five and the publisher and stuff. But then you are also, you self-publish your poetry. So I suppose you also get like the complete polar opposite side of that. Yeah. So what's the self-publishing process like for you? Do you find that stressful, rewarding, both?
I mean, both. Really, it's. I mean, I've done it twice now, which isn't enough times to feel like an expert on it.
For sure, yeah.
I think I definitely know more, and I think it can feel like a bit like elusive. Like it's something like the if you like search on YouTube like how to self-publish, like everyone's always like wondering. Everyone's like, oh, I don't know. But it's obviously nice to have so much creative control, also terrifying. It's like everything is nice and also terrifying. So it's like it's nice to have the freedom to do whatever you want, but then everything is your fault.
Right.
So that's sort of what it feels like. I think it's ended up okay. There were, I don't know how much you know about like the graffiti originally, which was the first poetry book I self-published, but the first edition of it is no longer in print.
Right.
It does not exist. I think I don't even have a copy in my house. I think I have one in my parents' house somewhere. So that was like, it definitely wasn't a failure. I think it is just one of those things that you learn through trial and error.
For sure,
and unfortunately / fortunately, I was in a position where a lot of people wanted to get in on my error.
Right.
But it wasn't, I don't mean it was an error. I honestly think, like, just as a book, I think it holds up. It was more in like it wasn't formatted well, kind of thing.
Sure, right, yeah. Typesetting.
Yeah. It was just things like that. So anyway, long way to say that I ended up having a second edition, which was a way to just feel like I could revise. Like let's pretend that one didn't happen. And then I'm like, am I going to be doing this just for like the rest of my life? Like I have this terrible nagging feeling that everything I do is just going to be like, and like 2 years from now, I'm like, I could have done that slightly better or whatever.
No. Yeah, that's like the universal condition of the artist, isn't it? Yeah.
No, I know. But then I thought it had something to do with age originally. And I'm like, maybe it still does, but I'm going to be like 50 and be like, I wish I had done that thing better when I was 48. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I'm hoping it stops someday because it's really like the worst part of any of this, to be honest. But just self-publishing projects. With Sweet Dark, it was way smoother. Had way more of an idea of what I wanted.
It's gorgeously published. I mean, I was really. It does not feel or look like it's been.
Yeah, thank you.
Self-published. I mean, like there's a lot of. I mean, I suppose the biggest issue for most people is the saturation of it, and also terrible cover design.
No, I know.
Astonishingly,
it's a plague on the all of self-publishing. I don't know why. I know you guys are writers, but
Please, anybody.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was, I can't really take credit for, I mean, like the cover art is just like, I think is probably the crux of why it is so amazing, which is something I did not do.
Right, yes.
Of course. But no, yeah, I think it holds up pretty well. And again, it's still like, you still take the same steps as traditional publishing, you just have like less money to do it with, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's still edited, still.
Well, I wanted to ask about how was the editing process for this then? It was Rhiannon.
So Rhiannon McGavin, who is a friend of mine who has a book out this month. It's called Groceryless Poems. Anyways, she, I came to her with a
manuscript.
Finished manuscript, but and we sort of had a conversation about like what I was trying to say and what I thought was important about it, and what she was very like. It wasn't like a send me the poems and I will make them like just objectively like better. It was a lot of like back and forth talking about it.
So that sort of macroscopic structure was like kind of down to her, or like in conversation with her that
definitely,
emerged.
Definitely. Which I think is one of like the best things about it. And I'm happy that came out in the edit. But I think that was the defining thing. It felt like a lot of conversation, and even like she would like sort of strike up like a Google Doc, but it was still like I'm trying to think of something specific because she's so good at it. But it was a lot of like questions.
I was going to say, that's the adage is the editor asks good questions.
She had excellent questions, nice. Which were insightful, helpful, etc. So it was actually a really smooth process. I think we went back and forth 2 or 3 times with it, and I think it's like way better for it, and graffiti was not edited.
Right, yes. Yes.
So you can imagine my dismay. But thank you for the kind words about Sweet Dark.
By all means.
She's pretty.
And I mean, I suppose I was doing some of the reading around it. Our Culture, the magazine Our Culture, did a really interesting article on it because they mentioned a concept which my entire undergrad dissertation was based on, called Metamodernism. Yeah, my whole thing was based on that.
That Our Culture thing's really good.
Yeah, I mean, so I just wanted to ask that kind of like relationship to sincerity, I guess, because one of the interesting things I noticed is you have this really interesting sort of almost evasion. There's almost evasive things like, yes, fine, and then you go on to say a grander statement. And so I think that's an impeccable functional design. Or then, hey, tell him, which is in tell me like you mean it. So I mean, I suppose that's, the article was having that concept where, sincerity and irony are so blurred at the moment that it's almost this new thing. It's not... It is kind of like oscillating is the main word between being sincere and ironic to the point where it's in this weird super state. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you weren't thinking about that consciously when you're writing it. But I mean, like, is that... Yeah, I don't know. Is there a self-consciousness in your poems? Or
that's really interesting. I wish you would have posed me this question earlier today. I could have thought about it over breakfast.
We can have like a SpongeBob 5 years later.
What I will say is, as I keep saying like as I age, I'm 24 years old. As I age, I feel like I'm tending more towards the sincere. I think a lot of it might be the sort of self-consciousness just of youth and like novelty and like not really knowing what's going on or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think the ones you like cited specifically, I think what I like about sort of those little not gimmicky, but phrases almost is how they sort of take you out of it into something that is at base level more like conversational. So then it then feels like you're talking to someone and you didn't realize you were, kind of thing. But you're right, in that being there's like a distance that's created by it, which I think is interesting too. But what I was saying is I think there's maybe more of a place for sincerity. I don't know.
Like just in broader culture at the moment. Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have enough thoughts to talk about that super in depth, but
yeah,
I think because I think a lot of it comes from like when you see someone try to be sincere and it makes you feel like weird, bad. I mean, it's just like an extreme state of vulnerability, right? So especially when it's in something you write, and just it's so embarrassing to like tell that this person was trying to be so sincere and then it like didn't land. So you're right, there's just like layers and layers and layers of irony. So then if something doesn't land, it's like there was another layer of irony or whatever. Yeah, but actually I think there's a lot of bravery maybe, and just and honestly, I've not to talk about the Bo thing again, but I think and you haven't seen it, I think Inside is incredibly sincere actually.
Bo's always struggled like he's metamodern, I guess, for lack of to use that term, you know. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I would like to think about that more, and then we can do a follow-up interview. Like the Billie Eilish thing where they ask
yes.
It's like, so what do you think about metamodernism now? Well, I've been thinking about it for months.
I did a master's in it, and
right. I should be asking you. That's probably insufferable to listen to me babble about something. I wrote 20,000 words about this. She has no idea what she's talking about.
That Billie Eilish interview, I haven't seen the fourth iteration of it.
I don't think
it's so interesting. I mean, like, I mean, this is kind of going off topic, but I want to, so we will.
No,
I think it's almost like, you know, there's a modulating culture, right? Whereas, like, I think of also another example from pop culture is Lil Nas X. Just constant infinite remixes in a way that just wouldn't really have been possible even like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And the same way that Billie Eilish, that interview never stays the same. Like there's, what's his name? Steve Price. He's like a sort of a visual art, a multidisciplinary artist, but he talks about the internet. Nothing is ever finished or ever even really started. It's just eternal present. And
which
there's an interesting...
I don't love it. Because and I think it goes into what I was talking about before of like you finish something, then 2 years later you're like, God, I wish I could have done that differently.
Yes.
That is genuinely the worst feel. Like there's nothing more satisfying than just being like, this is a finished thing.
It's done.
And because I tend to be quite a perfectionist anyways, my relationship with like my online presence has been so turbulent for the entire time it's existed.
Right.
I really don't like engaging with it at all, honestly. But you sort of, if you write, you almost like can't not.
Yes.
Which is, I don't love being forced to have an Instagram account, but whatever.
I mean, is that under like contract, like with publishers and stuff? Do they ask you to have social media presence, or?
I'm trying to think if in the contract you signed with Penguin, I think there were maybe contractual, like you must do one post minimum about the book or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll check the.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I should have given you primers on contractual law and metamodernism. Man, I had so much.
I know, I needed reading material.
You're reading this.
But yeah, I mean, but just from like a marketing standpoint, even not like you can't self-publish a book and not have all of it, I feel like. I mean, you can, but for what I do, like... I mean, at this point too, it would almost just be like negligent not to.
Yes.
It would feel like purposely like just ignoring like a quite not easy way to do it, but like you've sort of already got the tools here, so just use them that way, even if it feels like a bit soul crushing sometimes. I've definitely in the past couple of years moved away from it a lot. Like I feel like I chat shit on my Twitter, but I really only like go in on something when I'm like I have something new out.
Of course, yeah.
And I feel like that's the healthiest way for me to engage with it. But
probably the case, yeah. So going back to the poetry, you're talking about how the statement is like interrupted Because I feel you do the same with exclamation marks. And I love seeing exclamation marks in poems. I love an exclamation mark. They're so good.
They're too shy.
Yes.
just use them, exclamation scream.
I mean, a friend of mine, an excellent writer, Shawworth, he once said to me that, and he didn't mean this in a bad way, but he was talking about how, poems don't sing anymore. They don't shout. You don't get Walt Whitman style, like, proclamations. It's kind of quite a deadpan, metropolitan, like, kind of like, I don't know, muttering. Like.
It is. They all sound like muttering.
They're all muttering.
Like someone from a sewer is like, hey.
Bursting out from
Let me read this to you.
I mean, that's all poetry readings, really. If you think about it, isn't it?
You just pop out. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really a question. That was a statement. But I mean, I suppose I was leading on to that.
I like that as an observation.
Yeah, I mean, is your work confessional? Because that's talking about YA as one contested genre. Confessional is probably even more discoursified. Right. Is that a fraught term for you?
I don't think so. Because you're right, it is discoursified. But I've always felt that was just quite an accurate way, and like I have a lot of poets I really like who are described as professional. Like I love the epigraph in Sweet Darkest by Ada Limon, who is one of my favorite poets, and it's all very like feels like you're having a conversation with her kind of thing. And I don't know, I guess maybe the negative connotation never really affected me that much, because I always felt like that was the poetry that I most resonated with anyways. Like I always felt like that was the stuff that stuck with me. So I'm like, if this is impacting me in this way and I can do a similar thing with what I write, then I don't know. It can't be bad. Question mark. But yeah, no, I definitely call it confessional. I think what I tend to do is sort of I hide sort of the confession beneath some other sort of bells and whistles.
Yes.
Which again is probably my favorite kind of poetry to read. But
of course, yeah. I mean, on that sort of hiding and layers and stuff. I mean, is the narrative voice in your poems always directly you, or do you kind of complicate that a bit?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely complicated. There's too much to go through to give any examples. I think even just by being the speaker, it's I don't think it actually is ever me. It's sort of like a version of like a sort of mangled, version of me. Yeah. Again, I wish I could think about this for a moment longer. But yeah, again, I'm trying to think. This is a good question, and I want to give you like an example specifically, but it's hard.
Well, I suppose an example that came up from mind for me, which I found interesting, was now where is it? I've completely forgot the title.
We're both just sitting here, unthinking.
Well, it's you have your poem where you basically talk about the apocalypse happening.
Oh,
and the sun.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is ridiculous. I have a copy here. Just a big extreme close-up.
On the last day, I can't.
On the last day, yes, that's right. And it's interesting because you have this long narrative about sort of the apocalypse happenings, and then in the last poem, A Memory, it starts with, my picture of the apocalypse was perhaps unimaginative.
I really like, that's honestly a thing Ada Limon did once, was I forget which collection it was, but she just like tells a lie about whales in one of them, and then later she's like, that was a lie about the whales. But I liked how that acted as sort of a through line, so I think it makes it more of a narrative than, like, instead of feeling disparate, I think sort of ties it together at the end. But then too, it sort of was just like, it's almost like a sort of self-aware jab. And actually, originally the collection was going to be called like Poems for the End of the World or something. They were all going to be apocalypse poems. And I guess I had all these other apocalypse poems, sort of, and I'm like, I wonder if the one apocalypse poem I picked was like, I don't know, was this the best apocalypse poem?
Battle of the Apocalypses. Yeah.
Kind of. But yeah, no, I've just always liked that in poetry, honestly, where it just feels like this sort of manic little narrator is like sort of taking you through it. And that was the idea in Sweet Dark.
Yeah.
I think because I've been writing stuff for a new collection recently, and I'm not that I've been intentionally veering away from that sort of thing, but I think Sweet Dark was the experiment in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily like an inherent stylistic thing in me.
Like as in being that structured and having...
maybe. I don't know. We'll find out.
What was I going to say? Blanked. That was it. Yeah, well, because I mean, I suppose apocalypses are so interesting because they are fantasies of like a singular. I feel like it's always a spectacle. If you think of Revelations, right?
It is
it's a spectacle.
They're always a spectacle.
And you think of the great terrorist, the very bad, like the worst,
the incredible. The magnificent.
I'm sorry to sound like Zizek, but when he talks about it's like, my God. The worst terrorist tragedies of the start of 9/11, basically. Why am I talking about 9/11? We're going to have to cut all of this out.
Help.
My point is...
Yes, what is the point?
That's a good question. Where does it go? Yeah, well, I mean, the reality is that it's a kind of very tedious, slow decline when it comes to these things. But we like to imagine that
it wouldn't be.
It'll all be one thing and then it's over.
I think what I've always liked about them is that I'm, if you couldn't tell from everything, I write quite afraid of dying. And what I have always liked about the idea of a quick, visual, horrifying apocalypse is that it's just over. It's like, because I really don't like the idea of, this is a very specific fear, I don't like the idea of dying and then them very soon after coming up with some sort of cure for death. And they're like, right, like this was the last one. And then they're like, oh, we can upload you now. And they're like, this poor the land, they built some sort of statue for me and there's like undownloaded. And
that is like...
Anyways, so what I like about the apocalypse is that there's no, I think I forget what the line is in the poem, but it's the idea of this being like, this is it, and you're not missing out on anything else. And yeah, you're right, the spectacle of it is interesting.
I suppose the end of things kind of is what gives it meaning, right? I mean, that's a very... Insane. I say that like it's profound, but I don't know if it actually is.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm... No, sorry, I was going to say something else.
Go on. Have you forgotten as well?
Yeah.
My God.
Something about the bunker, I think.
I was thinking the bunker as well.
Are a little spotty, I don't
know. Well, I suppose, let's... What's next? What's the final question? What's next? Other than death, like what's in between that bit?
Hopefully very far away. I'll be doing other stuff in the middle.
Yes.
What am I doing? I'm sort of just always working on another poetry collection, so there's stuff for that. And then I finished the first draft of a
adult
horror.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So this is an adult novel.
It's sort of like horror, weird, fic, lit.
Weird, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's a bit weird.
Like Jeff Vandermeer style, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Jeff Vandermeer.
Yeah, he's great,
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday I got an email from my agent. He said he will be reading it this weekend, and so I'll let you know. We should have done this on like Wednesday, and I could have been like, "There's no book." He hated it. But yeah, no, I'd like to not like intentionally stray from YA. I think I just would sort of like to try something else.
Other genres. Yeah, I mean, well, how has that process been different? Has it been very liberating? Has it been a good process? Kind of being able to...
Yeah, well, it's been nice to just go insane, sort of, because I'm just saying whatever.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously in YA you can't make like, especially... I don't know, disgusting observations, sort of things that veer to whatever. Just you can't really. They can barely drink alcohol. Your editors are like, "Are you sure they're drinking alcohol? Like maybe they shouldn't." But no, it's been nice to just be like, "Here's everything," because that was the thing that was nice about the debut was like, this is what I feel has been ruminating sort of in my head since I was like very young, and with the adult it's like, here's the same thing except these are my like adult thoughts now.
Sure, for sure. Yeah.
So it feels like I'm sort of purging all of those, and I've just always been like, I just love horror And yeah, it's been fun to actually like I feel like I've now consumed enough of it to like try to do one. So that, yeah, it's really fun.
What's your third favorite horror film?
Third favorite,
yeah.
Oh my god, I don't even know what my first favorite is. This is the thing, I'm bad with favorites questions because I'm sort of just always in the mood for whatever.
Yes.
And I feel like I don't rank things in my head. Third might be, I don't know, like Suspiria.
Oh yeah, remake or original?
Both in the same slot.
Yeah, that's fine. There's no rules. Anything happens in the bunker.
Well, that's my answer from the bunker. If you ask me somewhere else, it'll probably be a different answer. I don't know. There's something about this place.
Can we get like the ratio to like really just like close it? Well, that's the
What's
spirit.
your third favorite
Horror film?
Yeah.
I'm not really into horror.
Okay. Well, yeah. Why would you ask me the question? Is you have no context for any of this.
No.
What's your third favorite? What's your favorite like genre of something? You like sci-fi?
I do like sci-fi.
You seem like a sci-fi kind of.
Yeah. Third favorite sci-fi film.
It's a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's hard, right? It's a bit tricky, isn't it? We're gonna sit here until you tell me.
You know, I'm a defender.
And then the interview will end.
I'm a defender of Interstellar.
I am too.
I defend it. I think it's more intellectually rigorous than people give it credit for.
Ian, I've said that exact same thing before. I think it's because I've said it has more intellectual vigor.
In a bunker, you know, this has happened before.
Well, because I saw it. I don't know if I was at if I was having a weird time, but right after I had to like call my dad.
Right.
So it was very emotionally resonant for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's a fair answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is completely gone off topic now, but I don't know. I think people always made fun of that Anne Hathaway scene. Whereas there's an equation for love, and everyone's always like, I don't know, they're just stem heads about it. They're stem heads about it. And they don't realise that the whole point of that is in contrast to Matthew McConaughey's character who's saying, but like, giving this rigorous science, and then, I don't know.
And I also think if you were in that position, you'd probably be like, I don't know what to do.
Yes.
Love. Yeah. Like, I think it's probably quite stressful anyways. And then you just sort of, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Savannah, thank you so much for chatting to me and chatting to me here. Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for leading me down the 200 stairs to get here.
It's best bit of the job, you know. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Oh, we could do like a Katia bite, you know. Have you ever seen?
Yeah. Bye. Bye.